If you are able to, feel free to turn on your video, but it's great to see everybody's faces. Welcome to Cambodia Town Thrives. We are sharing about updates about what's happening in Cambodia Town when it comes to development and ways that we as the community can help lead development that's equitable for our community members to really build investment. So I'm going to pass it along to Daniel, who is UCC's graduate intern, to lead us in a grounding exercise.
Hey everyone, thanks Susanna for the introduction and opening the space. I just want to introduce myself, Daniel, he, him, they, and I am a graduate student at UCLA, interning at UCC. I know that it's the middle of the week, so all of us might be at different stages of where our energy is at. We all had a long day probably, so just trying to find a way to recenter ourselves. So we're going to do a quick breathing exercise and then kind of jump into the next activities. So let me share. Okay.
Mindful breathing. Close your eyes and rest your hands on your knees. Bring your attention to the touch of your body on your seat. Feel the weight of your body on your chair or cushion. Make sure that your back is straight and that you're comfortable. Take a few deep breaths. While you're breathing deeply, relax your shoulders, your stomach muscles, the muscles in your face, your hands, and your legs. Let go of all the tightness in your body. Now bring your attention back to your breath. Notice what it feels like as it enters through your nose, goes down through your throat, filling your lungs, and back out through your nose. Notice your stomach and chest rise and fall each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. And just allow your breathing to be natural and relaxed. Now bring your attention to the feeling of your breath in your nose. Feel your breath as it comes in and goes out. Just focus on this sensation, paying attention to each time you breathe in and each time you breathe out. As you inhale, maybe your breath feels cool. And as you exhale, maybe it feels a little warmer. When your mind wanders, or if you become distracted, just notice what's going on in your head, and then gently bring your attention back to your breath, going in and out. Focus on the feeling of your breath and allow thoughts and feelings to come and go in the background. Now gently bring your attention back to the touch of your body on your seat and open your eyes.
All right. Thank you everyone for just participating in that quick breathing exercise. Susanna, did you want to touch base on the interpretations?
Yeah, so the interpretation link is below, it's live. So if you're able to click on the link and select either Spanish, French, or English, and then you can mute your original audio after you select the channel. If you're having issues with interpretation, if you can put it in the chat, or if you're not able to type, if you can just go ahead and speak out at this time, and then we can have another community member help you with the interpretation. Any issues? Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and get back to Daniel, and I'm not sure if you want to share more or if you want to move it on to the next agenda item.
Okay,
Hey,
yeah.
just a quick, hi, this is Elsa. Just a really quick note. This is right now on Facebook Live. And I haven't been able to figure out the speaker view on Facebook Live. I'm keeping to troubleshooting right now. But if folks have their video on, that means they're potentially on Facebook Live. So for the moment, at least, if you want to turn if you don't want to be on Facebook, then you can turn your video off.
Thank you, Elsa.
Okay, Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks everyone. First things first is we just want to give land acknowledgement to the Tongva community and the Tongva people for providing us this land for us to be able to operate and do various actions within our community and the community organize. And first and foremost, I think what's just really important, just beyond just land acknowledgement, is being able to self-educate ourselves, whether it be understanding where we situate ourselves right now in terms of what indigenous land we're on. Specifically in Long Beach is Pavunga land, but I'm in the Bay Area, so that's a Ohlone tribe. So just being able to know that, and also having the resources to even want to learn more, and how does that learning experience help us draw solidarity with the indigenous community, but also inform our work when we're trying to create the future of Cambodia town. So I'll just drop just some resources in the chat, and then also a link so for you to figure out where you can see which land you reside on. And then this is also Black History Month, so being able to acknowledge the legacy of our Black ancestors who contributed to the civil rights movement, and how does this work for Cambodia Town Thrives build on that legacy. So really uplifting some of the community events happening within the indigenous and as well the Black community right now. So I'll share that in the chat as well. And yes, I think, so I'll pass it on to Elsa and Alex. So Elsa is part of Long Beach Forward, and Alex is part of City Fabric, and they'll be going into kind of like the education piece of just better informing us of this whole entire planning process. Yes, so I'll pass it over to them right now.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Elsa Tung. I am the Land Use Program Manager at Long Beach Forward. Alex, did you want to pop on to introduce yourself while I bring up the slides?
Yeah, definitely. Hey, everyone. My name is Alex Chung. I'm the Senior Urban Designer at City Fabric. We're a nonprofit design studio here in Long Beach, and I'm happy to be here with you all.
All right. Wow, I just like lost all of my windows, I feel like. So give me 1 second while I pull up the slide deck. All right. I'm going to share my screen. We're just going to do a quick presentation. Can you all see the screen? And I'm going to, sorry, not share. present. I'm going to do a quick presentation, just a brief history of Long Beach. How did we get here? The history, housing, and health in Long Beach. This is just to kind of ground us, and thank you so much, Daniel, for that grounding that we are on native indigenous land. This is further grounding in terms of the history of development in Long Beach, and that will bring us to present day in terms of what we are thinking of in terms of Cambodia Town. So again, as Daniel opened us with, we are on indigenous land, and starting in the 1700s, the Spanish started to colonize this land. It involved missions to advance political, economic, and religious motivations, but that often involved, or for sure involved, the exploitation and persecution of indigenous peoples, of the Tongva, of the Ahachiman, and other indigenous nations of this land. This leads us to, with the Spanish colonization, in the 1780s, there's one Spanish soldier, Manuel Nieto, gets a huge land grant. And then over the next several decades, it gets divided up, and we see all these names in our street names these days, but these are all white folks, white men who came largely from the East Coast. The land has been divided into Rancho Los Cerritos, Rancho Los Alamitos, and then owned and further divided by Temple, Mr. Temple, Mr. Stearns, Mr. Bixby, and Mr. Wilmore. All of those names should be fairly familiar as street names. Slide, there we go. Fast forward a few decades, and in 1921, oil is discovered in Long Beach. We see remnants of this actually very alive and well today, but this is some views from Signal Hill. This fundamentally changes the landscape and the population and the economics of Long Beach as a city. In the 1930s, so just fast forward a few years, we come into what is one of the most significant housing and land use and community planning policies that this country has ever seen. And this happens in Long Beach, but this happens in all over the country, which is from 1934 to 1968. The Federal Housing Administration and private banks implemented a discriminatory policy called redlining. This policy denied or limited home loans to certain neighborhoods based on their racial composition. So basically, white folks and everybody else is how it was divided. The green and the blue were considered desirable neighborhoods for investment. So those were typically where the white folks lived, in the wealthier neighborhoods. The yellow and the red especially, those were the risky neighborhoods, considered risky, considered hazardous for lending, for the federal government to back these loans. So this made it extremely difficult for low-income, Black, brown, indigenous people of color to buy homes and generate wealth and pass on wealth to future generations. I'm going to show a real quick video, actually, so I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to get out of this presentation. And I'm going to show this video. And hopefully y'all can hear. Let me know if you can hear.
The early 1900s is when we start seeing the rise of the real estate industry in the United States. Developers are starting to learn how to build large-scale developments, shopping centers, and in the development of all of these new
We can't hear anymore. This is the original deed to this whole development, 252 units. No lot in said tract shall at any time be lived upon by a person whose blood is not entirely that of the Caucasian race. And for the purpose of this paragraph, no Japanese, Chinese, Mexican, Hindu, or any person of the Ethiopian, Indian, or Mongolian races shall be deemed to be a Caucasian. As a Mexican American, I would have been forbidden from purchasing this house.
Look at the Homeowners Loan Corporation maps, the redlining maps. The federal government basically would divide up cities and communities into various different strata, like cuts of beef. And they would have green areas, which were very desirable and highly investable, blue areas, also desirable and highly investable. And they had yellow areas where there's slightly higher risk, so be careful. And then they had red zones. In those red areas, they basically wouldn't back mortgages or insurance policies.
This is something that happened all over our country. There are people who never got to pass on homes to their children. There were people who never got to build up credit. There were entire neighborhoods that were deprived of investment opportunities. And so when you're talking about institutionalized racism, those are the institutions that manufacture relationships and opportunities in a city.
The federal government, state governments, local government have had a hand in that marketplace throughout our history to shape how our communities look, to push resources to certain parts of communities to benefit certain populations.
And that structure, which led to persistent disadvantage, not just in terms of making a home, but in terms of the ability to have power and voice in a society, has in many ways continued forward to this day.
All right, so I'm going to pop back into the presentation. So this, I can't guarantee whether this sign was in Long Beach or not. I don't necessarily think it is, but this is an example of a sign that at the front of a new development, a new subdivision, which was exclusive and restricted. So this happened all over the country, and certainly in Los Angeles and Long Beach as well. So now we're gonna, man, why is this? There we go. So while this is happening, I mean, these policies are happening, and these exclusionary policies are in effect. While this is happening, we're in World War II, and Long Beach is fundamentally and profoundly changed. We become the staging ground for the war in the Pacific, which changes the city in profound ways. The US Navy and war industries employed 200,000 people in our area, in Long Beach and the rest of the harbor area. And this was the World War II was the first large-scale migration of Black Americans to Long Beach. They were escaping the Jim Crow South, and they came to Long Beach and they worked in our naval and war industries. At the same time, Japanese Americans, and we had a robust Japanese American population in Long Beach and San Pedro, they were forcibly removed and incarcerated in internment camps, incarceration camps, because of following the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So these are fundamental demographic and industrial and economic shifts in Long Beach. This affects our housing as well. So everything that we're talking about right now really goes back to housing. The city annexed new land, developed hundreds of new units for all of these new people and all of these new workers, but still there was a severe housing shortage. We actually had rent control back in the 40s and back in World War II, and there was conversion of single family homes. But here, again, Black Americans, African Americans could work, so please come to Long Beach to work, to give us your labor, but they were banned from living or buying homes in the most desirable areas. And so we have this news article here, Housing Problem of Negroes Studied. And I'm gonna read in the second paragraph. It said that the Negro section around Anaheim Street and California Avenue, which is the neighborhood that we're actually talking about today, where a former population of 600 lived, now must take care of 6,000 Negroes. Influx of Negro war workers has been to a district which has not been increased in size. So this is what underlies all of the massive changes that are happening in the 30s and 40s. I'm going to pass it to Alex now to bring us into the second half of the 20th century, into modern day.
Thank you, Elsa. Yeah, and I'm also getting the time notice that we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to try to go through this somewhat quickly, but I'm also going to try to speak slow enough for our interpreters to make sure that they're catching up. So kind of to bring us to the 1950s to the 1960s, World War II led to an influx or a lot of basically a need for jobs. And a lot of that led to the creation of freeways, because that's a great job. So we have the 710 freeway, the 405 freeway, and the 110 freeway, Long Beach freeways that cut through a lot of our communities. But then at the same time, they also were to support the port, which was the largest port in the United States. So this large piece of infrastructure is still embedded in our communities and neighborhoods today and have an effect on our communities as a whole in terms of environment. Next slide, please. So in the 1960s, we also saw a rise in the civil rights movement and more fair housing movements as well. So Long Beach Black and women-led community organizing was central to a lot of the housing victories statewide. So, there was in 1963, the California Fair Housing Act, which allowed folks to get homes, people of color to get homes. However, there was Proposition 14, which came soon after in 1964, which would basically remove it, which would thereby allow property sellers, landlords, and their agents to discriminate on ethnic grounds when selling their house. So this was declared unconstitutional, and a lot of that work had to do with a lot of community organizing, and that was brought together by a lot of Black community organizers, starting with the local NAACP chapter. And they were central to a lot of fair housing victories statewide. At the same time, in 1968, Latinx students from Poly High School organized a walkout protesting the lack of racial studies, ethnic studies in education in both their faculty and their curriculum. Next slide, please. So in 1968, there was a large wave of immigration that happened. For a lot of Cambodian Khmer Americans, that was due in part, unfortunately, through genocide. Long Beach, as you may know, has the largest population of Cambodians outside of Cambodia. And the first wave arrived to Long Beach as refugees after the genocide was perpetuated by the Khmer Rouge from 1975 to 1979. Fast forward kind of to modern day, in 2007, we saw the incorporation of Cambodia Town. It became an official neighborhood, but it was under the condition that it had to be a business improvement district, so a very business-centered model. Next slide, please. So the next two slides I'm gonna go through real quickly, but going back to Elsa's redlining map, which you could see there on the very left, you could kind of see Cambodia Town right there in the center as like a red line area. And as you can see, based on these other maps, poverty rates, people of color, you can see that there has been the effects of these old racist policies trickling down all the way down to how it affects our communities today and what they look like today. Next slide, please. And that also goes for the percentage of renters and also life expectancy. So based on where you live determines how long you're going to live. Where you live will depend on how long you will live. Next slide, please. And so what happens, right? You look at your neighborhood, and a lot of these photos are from Cambodia town. You see broken sidewalks, liquor stores, lack of investment in parks. You see fast food and drive-throughs. You see a lot of trucks and things like that. And this was all in a way on purpose. This is really the story of, like Mary said in the comment, the tale of two cities. It really is this inequity that has come about because of this racist investment. Next slide, please. But it doesn't have to be this way. You know, we all as a community can work together to change this through planning and policy. And that's really why we're here today, is to talk about this opportunity to really reform through policy and planning how we view the city and how we can create investment in our community without you know, this idea that, like, yeah, basically we could reinvest in our community. Next slide, please. Awesome. So I went through that really quickly and I really did a very broad overview, but does anyone want to share questions, thoughts, or feelings? Maybe one or two, we could field one or two of those. I see in the chat, will this slideshow be available afterwards? We could definitely make it available afterwards for folks who are interested. Just we'll follow up with you afterwards. Awesome.
And also these slides were in English and Spanish, but if you also want it in Khmer, if you can let us know, we can also send it over in Khmer. So thank you for translating those pieces.
Yes. All right. So,
oh yeah, does anybody, are we good on time, or do we have a couple minutes for folks to have feedback?
I know that was a lot to process, so if there's more that you want to share, you can definitely share in your breakout groups. So like what Alex was saying, you know, for so many years, the city has disinvested in our community. And now as community leaders and stakeholders, we have this opportunity that we can lead our own investment and our own equitable development for our community. And so we can advocate for this. We can use policy and the systems at play and change that so it can better fit for our community members. And so that's why we put together Cambodia Town Thrives, to be able to have a community-led effort to do planning within our neighborhood and to really help balance out what equitable development looks like for us. So we have started that process, and the first step we did was a survey in which we collected what are the priorities and the values that folks want to see in Cambodia Town. And based upon this survey, we had about over 200 folks reply to the survey. We came up with, we were able to have 6 priorities that were listed. So Alex or Elsa, if you can share that on the screen. The first one is affordable housing. So community members really listed that in Cambodia Town, affordable housing is a huge need for our community. Let me see if I can share on my screen. Okay. And then the second one is education and learning, being able to have opportunities for our community members to learn and to grow. Third one is economics and business. So being able to invest in our small businesses and be able to have intergenerational wealth grow within our communities. The fourth one is livable and healthy communities, having spaces of green space, opportunities for our community members to grow healthy and have strong children and families. And the fifth one is culture and art, being able to really highlight the diverse culture that's within Cambodia Town and be able to express who we are through art, through murals and dancing and music. And lastly is safety and security, being able to invest in programs that really create security within our communities, which means investing in our youth, investing in positive factors that make our community safe and surround us with healthy outcomes. With that, based upon these 6 guiding principles, we created examples of different community development projects that can be done in our neighborhood that will help bring about these values that are listed here. And so that's what we're going to be doing in our breakout groups, is that we are going to share what are our priorities when it comes to these different community projects that we can invest in. If you're not able to join in our breakout groups because you're joining us through Facebook Live or you have to leave early, we do have another way that you can give us your feedback. We are also collecting a survey. So right here is our second survey. And this collects the same information in terms of being able to prioritize and invest in different community projects, starting from a small project to medium and then to large. We'll go ahead and drop those links into the chat box. So if you're able to complete the survey, please complete the survey. But this is the same information that we will be going through in our breakout groups. So with our breakout groups, we'll go ahead and assign you to a specific breakout groups. But if you are Spanish or Khmer speaking, we're going to go ahead and have them join into the main session, and we'll put you into a Spanish speaking breakout group and then a Khmer speaking breakout group.
Susanna, do you
survey number 2, which is in multiple languages, English, Spanish, Tagalog, actually Khmer and Vietnamese. And it's going to be questions surrounding the mural activities we all just did. And the other part that we're going to have for our community event is not event, but the community focus group, which will focus on on elderly community workers and community residents, as well as youth.
Yeah, thank you, Seon. Yes, really, please do share that survey number 2. It's important. We need more votes, y'all, to help us figure out what we're gonna prioritize. So Seon did a great job covering what our next steps are. We're gonna take a lot of the data that you all did today, as well as survey number 2, and put it into a planning document. This community planning document will contain not only projects, but also policies that will help fulfill the 6 goals that we described earlier on in this presentation. So it's again really important that you take this survey, because this community plan will help inform the city that these are the top priorities for Cambodia Town, and these are the things that we want to see happen in the next 10, 20 years. Especially since the city currently is going through a process called the AC Zip. The AC Zip is this idea that, hey, let's look at Cambodia Town and also the neighborhoods to the left and right of it, and let's rezone this neighborhood. Let's look at how we can increase housing. Let's figure all this out. But the problem is, a lot of times these city-led processes are not informed by the community. And so helping us participate in a plan like this will really make sure that your voice and the Cambodia Town voice is being heard. We're gonna hit the streets and make sure that we're at community events taking place. We're sharing this survey online. We're doing those focus groups. We're talking to businesses. We're talking to residents. And so we then want to make sure that once this plan is done, that, you know, it's going to be kind of like a technical document. So one thing that we're also doing is we're going to create a community project that kind of goes along with it. That community project could look like a mural. It could look like an art piece. It basically is a temporary physical representation of this plan. And it's supposed to make a statement to the city saying that, hey, this is something that we all back and we believe you all should take a look at. So to stay tuned for that. There will be a website up giving more details, but in the meantime, make sure to follow us on Facebook and on our Instagram at Cambodia Town Thrives, all one word. And so with that limited time, I'm going to hand it over to Susanna to close this out. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I just am so inspired by how everyone is dreaming together and how, you know, although our city hasn't invested in us, that you are taking the time today to invest in Cambodia Town and really change it from the ground up. So I really appreciate all your hard work in being able to contribute to this effort. This is just only the beginning. We're dreaming together, but soon we're going to be able to see this come into fruition. So I really appreciate all of you for taking the time. I really appreciate all of our partners that are here at the table, Best Start, First Five, LA, the California Endowment, AOC 7, there's so many listed, Families in Good Health, EM3, Khmer Girls in Action for supporting this effort too. And so we look forward to what's coming up next, and please keep in touch. Please share out the survey, and we really appreciate you. Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. And if the facilitators could maybe stick on for just another minute, but thank you all.
If you want to take off the screen share.